The alarm on the station tore through my sleep before my eyes even opened. Red light spun across the walls. Something was falling out of the sky above the gas giant, and it was falling fast. My name is Ethan Marsh, and until that moment, I was the only living soul on Outpost Theta 9. I had been left behind after an evacuation order got lost in a communication blackout. For 6 long weeks, I had been completely alone, floating above a dead world with nothing but empty corridors and my own voice for company. Now something was crashing toward me, and every warning light on my console told me it was not going to end quietly. I grabbed the old shuttle before I could think twice. The tracking display showed a transport ship, hull scorched black, spinning out of control. It was not a rescue ship. It was not supposed to be here at all. I locked onto its emergency beacon and pushed the shuttle engines harder than I had ever pushed them before. By the time I reached the wreck, it had already slammed into a debris field near the station and gone still. I docked with shaking hands and stepped through the twisted airlock into darkness. The ship was silent in the worst way. Cargo crates were torn open. Metal walls were bent inward, like something powerful had forced its way through them. I moved carefully, my flashlight cutting through the dust, until I reached the back of the cargo hold. That is where I found her. She was enormous, even lying still. Gray scales, cracked wings, and eyes that were struggling to stay open. I had heard of her kind before, whispered about in trade routes as sacred and untouchable. A sovereign worm, the most protected creature known across the stars, and someone had tried to smuggle her out like cargo. She looked at me, and I felt something pass between us, something urgent, not fear, trust. Behind her, tucked safely under one broken wing, were 6 eggs. Her breathing slowed. She placed her head gently near the eggs, then looked back at me one final time, as if she was asking a question only I could answer. I knelt beside her and placed my hand near the eggs, and she let out a long breath before going still forever. I did not know what I was agreeing to, but I knew I could not walk away. Getting the eggs back to the station alive was harder than anything I had done in my life. I had no incubator, no manual, no idea what temperature or air mix they needed. I tore apart heating coils from unused rooms and wrapped the eggs in insulation blankets from my own bunk. I rerouted the station's air scrubbers to mimic warmer, thicker air, guessing at numbers from an old cargo manifest I found on the wrecked ship's damaged computer. For 4 days, I barely slept. I watched 6 small heat signatures on a cracked monitor screen, terrified that any mistake would end everything before it even began. Then, one by one, they hatched. They were smaller than my forearm, with wings like wet paper and eyes still cloudy from the shell. The moment they heard my voice, every single one of them turned toward me. I do not know what I expected. I did not expect to feel like I had suddenly gained a family after being so completely alone. I fed them by hand, using a thick glove because even as hatchlings, their small jaws were surprisingly strong. I learned their sounds. A short chirp meant hunger. A long chirp meant fear. A low hum meant they were happy, and that hum quickly became the most common sound on the station. Weeks turned into months. They grew fast, faster than I expected. By the 2nd month, they were chasing each other through the corridors, tumbling over one another, and finding creative ways to get into places they were not supposed to be. By the 3rd month, they had figured out that if they gathered around me while I slept, their combined body heat kept the entire room warm. Nobody taught them to do that. They just decided I should not be cold anymore. I started talking to them the way I used to talk to the recycling unit, except now, someone was actually listening. I told them about Earth, about mountains and oceans they would never see, about how strange it was that 6 months ago, I thought I would spend the rest of my life talking to machines. By the 4th month, they were hunting small station pests on their own, proud of themselves every time, bringing their tiny catches to show me like trophies. By the 5th month, they had grown large enough that I could rest my hand on their backs without bending down. I should have felt lonely during those months. Instead, for the first time since the evacuation order failed to reach me, I felt like I had a reason to wake up every day. Then, in the 6th month, a signal came through that I had almost stopped hoping for. A ship was approaching, and this one was not a smuggler. It was an official Alliance vessel, sleek and imposing, nothing like the transports that usually pass through this route. I stood at the docking bay with all 6 of them gathered around me, now the size of large dogs, wings folded, eyes alert. When the airlock opened, an alien officer stepped through, dressed in formal Alliance colors. His name, he said, was Officer Vantosh, and the moment he saw the 6 creatures surrounding me, his expression shifted from professional calm to something closer to disbelief. "That should not be possible," he said, staring at them. "Sovereign worms do not bond with outside caretakers. There are entire research teams dedicated to understanding why this cannot happen." "Nobody told them that," I said. He tried to explain it to me slowly, as if I might not understand the importance of what he was saying. "Sovereign worms," he said, "only bond once, to a single guardian, and the process usually requires generations of careful ritual and deep genetic connection between the worm and its own kind. It was not something that happened by accident. It was not something that happened with someone from another species entirely." He reached toward the smallest one, gently, carefully, following whatever careful procedure his people used. The moment his hand got close, she let out a sharp, powerful cry that echoed down the corridor. Instantly, the other 5 answered with the same sound, moving to stand between him and me, wings spreading wide, eyes locked on him with clear warning. Officer Vantosh stepped back immediately, holding up both hands. "They will not leave you," he said, and this time it did not sound like disbelief. It sounded like realization. "No," I said, "they will not." He spent the next several hours running scans, sending messages, speaking quickly into a communicator to someone higher up in his chain of command. I sat quietly with the 6 of them curled around me, waiting to hear what would happen next, uncertain if they would try to take them anyway. Finally, Officer Vantosh returned, and this time his tone had changed completely. "The bond has fully formed," he said. "It is complete, and by our oldest laws, a completed bond of this kind cannot be broken without causing serious harm to both sides. This has never happened with someone outside our own species. Not once, in all recorded history." I did not fully understand what that meant for me until he explained it further. According to ancient Alliance law, anyone who successfully completed this bond with a sovereign worm was recognized as their official guardian, a title that came with protection, respect, and full authority over their well-being. It was a title no outsider had ever received before. I was not a soldier. I was not a scientist. I was simply an engineer who refused to let 6 helpless creatures die on a station nobody else cared about. Yet somehow, that single decision had changed everything. A few days later, a message arrived from my original command post, asking when I planned to return to active duty. I looked around at the 6 of them, now stretched out across the room, some sleeping, one watching me curiously, waiting for my next move. I sent back a short reply. I told them I now had 6 dependents, and I would need a much bigger living space before I could return to any post. They never questioned it again. To this day, I still do not fully understand why they chose me the moment they opened their eyes. Maybe it was simply because I stayed. Maybe loyalty like that does not need a complicated explanation. It only needs someone who refuses to walk away when it matters most. Every night since then, they still gather around me the same way they did as hatchlings, filling the room with warmth, keeping watch even while they sleep. I went from being the only living soul on a forgotten station to being surrounded by 6 loyal companions who refused to let me be alone again. And honestly, I would not trade a single moment of it.